So this video is going to go into utilizing key schedules for MEP projects in order to create your own data relationships. So Revit out of the box comes with its own relational database, example being the relationship between hosted elements and their host. That's a data relationship, as well as certain templating objects, space type templates, and various other instances. And what this does is it allows objects inside of the Revit model to have a relationship with some underlying data schema. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to create our own kind of relational database using our own methods by taking advantage of the key schedules functionality inside of Revit. The example today is going to be a really simple one, but you can certainly expand this to fit your needs. The example we're going to use today is for calculating air changes per hour inside of a space. So this is something that a mechanical engineer might do fairly often. And what they would normally do is they'd have a reference table for various space types. And they would have an applied either by code or by design guidelines, a certain air changes per hour that need to be applied for that particular space type. And so what we're going to do is we're going to recreate that data table and then create a relationship between that data table to the various spaces within inside the project. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So right off the bat, the first thing that we can do is to create that key schedule. And you create key schedules the same way you create normal schedules, by going to the View tab and going to Schedules, and in this case, choose Schedules Quantities. Now, this is where you would create a normal category or element based schedule for scheduling actual building components or quantities. But we're going to make one slight variation. The first thing we need to do is select what type of category are we going to create this relationship with. We've already decided that we're going to create this relationship with spaces. So if I highlight spaces, I'm going to go over here. Before I click OK, I want to change this radio button from schedule building components, which would just give me a list of spaces, to an actual schedule of keys. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a set of keys for us. And these keys are going to relate to the type of space that these rooms are, and then the associated air changes per hour. Now, the advantage of using key schedules is that it does a lot of the hard work for you in the background. So right off the bat, it's gonna automatically apply a property to all spaces inside the building called space style, and this is where we can set our key value, and we're going to do that in a minute. And then once we set that key value, we can apply it to the various spaces, and it'll inherit all the properties that we've defined inside this schedule. So again, just choose schedule keys. You can change the name if you'd like. I'm going to leave these default for this example. So when I click OK, you can see right off the bat it's automatically applied this key name to the schedule for us. And again, this is going to be the space style or space type. So we're going to do an assembly, maybe a cafeteria, IT room. We're going to set these up. But there's one thing that Revit doesn't have, and this is where you're able to kind of customize this for your needs. It doesn't have a required air changes per hour property. So we're going to go ahead and add that. So I'm going to click on Add Parameter. And I'm going to give this name required ACH or air changes per hour. Now normally this actual unit is normally air changes per hour, so it would be the value per hour. But we're going to just choose a standard number, which will allow us to essentially enter any value that we want. And then we actually, because this is actually going to add a property inside each space, we can actually choose which group the parameter will reside under. So in this case, we're going to put it under mechanical flow. That's a good place for it. And we'll click OK. And we now have these two fields. And again, you can build upon this and add as many fields as you like for this particular space type. So we're going to do just that one. I'm going to click OK, and what we have here is a blank table. Now again, this is completely blank. This is why this is so great. We can completely customize this how we need. So the way that you would go ahead and add new keys and new values inside this table is to go up here to the ribbon, and under rows we can insert a new data row. So I'm going to do that, let's see, we'll do this 5 times. Okay, so I now have 5 rows, and I can begin to build this table. So I said, you know, I'll have an assembly area maybe. Okay, I'll have maybe a cafeteria. Go ahead and add an IT room. These are rooms that fairly commonly require some rate of exhaust or air change. I'm going to go ahead and put a restroom in here. And lastly, we'll call this a mechanical equipment room. And what I can do now is I now have this list. This list can grow, and again, the columns can grow as well, but we're going to use just a single example of required air changes. I'm just going to start putting values in here. These would obviously be associated with code requirements or design guidelines for your particular clients. I'm just going to go in here and put in 8, put in 10. And these are required air changes. And the nice thing about this is that we can add to this and update this whenever we want, and the changes will propagate throughout our model without us having to do anything. So that's the kind of the real benefit of creating this kind of relational database, this custom relational database inside your model. So we're all set here. So I actually am going to jump back on over and start applying these space styles to various spaces inside the building. I happen to have a space schedule already set up here. And what I can do is I can start to now add the fields that we've just created. Remember that key name and the required ACH are automatically added as properties to our spaces. So if I go ahead and add some additional fields to my space schedule here, you can find them right here. We have space style, I'm going to add that, and required ACH, I'm going to add that. So now at this point, I can actually, you're going to get an enumerated list here, or a drop-down menu, to allow you to apply all the available space styles to each space. So let's go ahead and do that for a few. So I know that I have a mechanical room here. I can go ahead and apply the MER room, and you can see it automatically applies the value for air changes per hour to the space now. So we'll do the same for the electrical room. We'll go to the IT room, add that one, and we'll go to these 2 restrooms. And we'll just apply these. I'm not going to do each one. It would take too long. So we'll just do a couple examples. You can see, and they automatically get the correct value that we've set up in our table. And of course, if I were to change any of those values, they would automatically be reflected here. Now this is all well and good, but let's actually add a little bit of complexity to this. Let's actually use these air changes to calculate the required exhaust airflow rate. So I'm going to go ahead and add a calculated field. So I'm going to call this required exhaust airflow. And this is actually going to be in the units of, in this case, this is going to be HVAC airflow. And our formula is going to be the air changes per hour times the volume in the room, which I already have as a field here. Make sure to add that if you don't have one. So I'm going to do air changes per hour times the volume, and then we need to divide by 60, because essentially that would give us the air changes per hour times the volume would give us cubic feet per hour, and we actually want cubic feet per minute. So all we need to do is divide by 60 minutes to get cubic feet per minute. So I'm going to go ahead and do that calculation right now. I can click on this button, I can grab ACH, I can multiply that times the volume, and I'm going to wrap these just to keep my sanity, and then I'm going to divide this by 60 minutes. I'm going to click OK. If you enter the formula correctly, you'll see the new property appear here. If you get a warning, just double check that you entered that formula correctly. I'm going to click OK. And here we go. You can see that it's now calculated airflow rate in cubic feet per minute. So this is great. So if I happen to, let's say I want to add the janitor's closet as let's say I wanted to add a better one. Let's say I wanted to add this lobby here as an assembly area. Again, all I have to do, it'll automatically create this calculation for me. Now, one last thing to take this kind of one step further to really kind of close the loop on this type of workflow is that we can actually now do a conditional format against the actual exhaust air that we have in our model. So what I can do is if you've added exhaust air terminals to your model, then they will automatically kind of populate a property that exists here called actual exhaust airflow. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to the end. And what we can start to do now is do comparative kind of a comparative analysis against what's required by our design guidelines and what we're actually providing inside our space. So let's see, I can actually change this to a restroom, and you can see I have required to have 310 CFM of exhaust air in this restroom, 432 CFM in this one, and I'm only providing 100 CFM. So what I can do is actually go back to my space and now begin to make design adjustments on the exhaust airflow in those particular spaces in order to satisfy the required air changes per hour.